Welcome to Academic Gain Tutorials. In this video, we will look into the differences between buying and leasing. Buying is an arrangement whereby the seller transfers the ownership of the vehicle to the buyer in exchange for an adequate money consideration. The risk and rewards attached to the ownership are also transferred, with the transfer of title. On the other hand, leasing is defined as an arrangement in which the lessor confers the lessee the right to use the asset in exchange for adequate consideration, that is, periodical payments in the form of lease rentals for an agreed term. In this agreement, one party or leasing company buys the asset and grants its use by another party or lessee for a definite term. So, let's look into the basic differences between buying and leasing in a tabular form. Difference number 1. The term buying is used to refer a process in which the seller transfers the ownership of the asset to the buyer for the adequate money consideration, whereas leasing is an arrangement in which one party purchases the asset and conveys the right to use the asset to another party for periodical payments. Number 2. In buying, the parties involved are the buyer and seller. Conversely, the parties involved in the case of leasing are lessor, that is the owner of the asset, and lessee, that is the user of the leased asset. Number 3. In buying, the value of the asset is the cost of owning the asset, while the value of leasing is the cost of using the leased asset. Number 4. In buying, the buyer has the right to sell or trade the asset anytime. On the contrary, leasing arrangement does not allow such freedom to the lessee, as the ownership of the asset lies with the lessor. Number 5. The consideration for buying the asset has to be paid in lump sum or equated monthly installment for a specific term. As against this, the lessee has to pay lease rentals every month, so as to use the asset. Number 6. Buying is not restricted to a specified term as in the case of leasing, so, buying allows a person to use the asset throughout its economic life. Number 7. Once the buyer clears all the dues against the asset, he or she owns it. Conversely, at the end of the lease term, the lessee has two options, either to own the asset by giving a nominal amount or return it to the lessor. Although operating lease does not contain this option. Number 8. The repairs and maintenance of the asset are the responsibility of the buyer. In buying arrangement, in contrast, depending on the terms of agreement and type of lease, the responsibility for repairs and maintenance is determined. Number 9. A leased asset is an off-balance sheet item. Hence it does not appear in the balance sheet, unlike buying wherein the asset bought is shown in the asset side of the balance sheet under the non-current asset. And, difference number 10. The buyer of the asset enjoys the salvage value of the asset, because he or she owns the asset. On the contrary, the lessee is deprived of the salvage value, because the asset is the property by the lessor. We can say that leasing is an alternative to the buying the long-term asset, out of owned or borrowed funds. One can choose any of the two alternatives, but before that prioritize your requirements. That is, if you need the asset for a long period, it makes sense to buy the asset because the equivalent annual cost of owning and operating cost would be less than leasing it. So, these are the differences between buying and leasing. If this lecture was helpful, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Thank you.